He has been criticized by the San Antonio Police Officers Association for not being fair to former officers who are on trial, and also for low bonds and bails that they put at his feet as being responsible for violent people getting back on the streets and attacking San Antonio officers.
We're talking about Bexar County DA Joe Gonzales. Before we extended an invitation for him to join us here on this very segment, we have since learned about hundreds of records, documents of conversations between his office and a firm called the Wren Collective. We've got a lot to talk about with Joe Gonzales, who joins us now here in the studio. Thanks for being here.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
Let's first talk about those allegations from the Police Officers Association. As Steve mentioned, accusations about low bail, failure to prosecute repeat offenders. We had the president of the union, Danny Diaz, joining us right here last week. He was making the accusation that your office is mishandling cases of officers who are facing charges because of 2 mistrials in the last couple of months. Those were mistrials because the prosecution did not hand over evidence to the defense as they should have. Your response to those accusations, is your office mishandling those cases?
Well, there's a lot to unpack there, but first let me start with that comment you just made because it's an inaccurate representation of what happened. It's exactly because our prosecutor handed over the evidence the minute he discovered and was made aware of it is what caused the mistrial. In that last case that he talked about was information about it, and you got to understand that the case is pending, so there's only so much that I can say about it, but I will tell you that there was information that came to his attention after the jury was selected and before they started their case in chief, and within the hour he disclosed that information to the defense attorney, which is what he's required to do. So it wasn't, as the president of SAPOA stated last week, that he sat on this evidence in order to obtain a conviction. So it's important to clarify that.
Yeah, and I just want let's put up the statement that Danny Diaz put out last week, because I want you to respond to exactly what he had to say. And that's why I asked you to come on here, because I think it's important to give you the same platform that we gave Danny Diaz. Do we have the graphic for that right now? This is from Danny Diaz's initial statement. From withholding crucial evidence to expert witness testimonies, these unlawful practices reflect a clear bias against San Antonio police officers who've been awaiting a fair trial for over a year. A clear bias against San Antonio police officers. How do you respond to that?
Well, again, it's not a fair characterization about what happened in both of those cases. The one that I mentioned earlier was some information about a criminal history of one of the witnesses. The case previous to that had to do with some potential testimony of one of the expert witnesses that again came to the attention of our prosecutor some days before trial. He didn't believe that it rose to the level of disclosing that, didn't believe that it was a Brady material, but I've since counseled him. We've talked to him, and he realizes that he needs to go the extra mile and err on the side of disclosing everything. So again, and I've talked to them, the entire team, and I'm satisfied that they weren't trying to hide any evidence or anything that was critical.
There's no bias against San Antonio police officers from what you have been able to find? I don't want to put those words in your mouth. Do you?
Absolutely not. Quite the opposite. He mentioned something about due process. That's exactly what this is. It gave him the due process to then come back to fight another day. So a denial of due process would have been my prosecutor sitting on this evidence and failing to disclose it and going forward with trial, which could have potentially ended up in a conviction. But no, he did the right thing.
This seems like the latest volley in what has become a back and forth with your office and the San Antonio Police Officers Association. It goes back to August when there were a number of officers that were injured. I've never seen this kind of friction, to put it lightly, between SAPOA and a sitting district attorney. I mean, they put out they think the DA Chronicles, right, and they've done a number of things. I asked Danny, do his officers feel safer today than they did in August? And he said no. Yeah. Where is all this friction coming from?
Well, I'll tell you that it stretches back to before the shootings in August. It stretches back to around the time of George Floyd and Black Lives Matter, around the time when I learned that San Antonio was one of the last major metropolitan areas, one of the last largest cities that did not have a civil rights division. So I made the decision to create a civil rights division because it's important. I said that from the very beginning. No one is above law. That we need to hold everyone accountable and anyone who commits a crime, including members of law enforcement. You've seen our office prosecute constables, city councilmen, and members of law enforcement should not be any different.
You talk about changes that your office has looked at making, has made since all this tension, to put it lightly, has really sparked up since the end of August. I want to ask you about the Wren Collective. This is a firm we told our viewers about a little bit earlier in this show. Online, they describe themselves as a firm that designs full-throttle campaigns to achieve change. They craft messages. They are working to transform the criminal justice system. Why is your office working with that firm, and what service are they providing?
Well, the Ren Collective was founded by a lady that I have known since I first ran for office. She heard about what caused me to run for office and offered her support during the campaign. So her involvement with me during the early years of the campaign and even currently in the DA's office is a support for messaging. We didn't hire her. We haven't exchanged any monies or anything like that. She has volunteered to provide some messaging for us, and so that's basically the relationship that we have had with her.
Is it a gift? I mean, how would you describe your relationship with them? Because if you look back at the months and months that you have a lot of communications. You and your deputy DA have had a lot of communications back and back about a lot of different things. I mean, how would you term your relationship?
Well, again, it's one where she has volunteered some advice on messaging. I think you'll see that most of the communications was between her and my first assistant. I think there were a few of them where I was CC'd. I was included in the messages, but most of them have been communications with Christian Henriksen.
And there are some that are case specific, where they were talking about specific cases your office was prosecuting. So is the Ren Collective in any way helping you all prosecute cases or decide next steps on how you pursue a case?
I've said from the very beginning, and I'll continue to say that nobody makes those decisions. I myself make those decisions. I'm the one with the name on my door, and nobody outside the office has had any influence or input in decisions on prosecution. Again, if there are any messages that talk about specific cases, for example, I know that there was one where her advice was about a press conference, not about how we prosecute a particular individual.
Well, there was one that had to do with Eric Cantu.
That's the one I'm talking about.
The young person that was in a vehicle, and I think they had a communications about dropping all charges against the young man that was involved, that was shot by a police officer. That would seem to go beyond just like PR talk. I mean, there were talks about the Eric Cantu case. There were talks about your relationship with the San Antonio police chief, your relationship with the Bexar County sheriff, those kind of things.
Again, those are communications based on how to best craft a message to the public. But she certainly wasn't involved in any decision making. The Eric Cantu case that I learned about today was about, again, helping prepare a press conference. But it's certainly not about the decisions that we make that affect prosecution.
Do want to ask you about one message that we looked at that was in the 200 pages or so that we received. One said that by your request, you wanted to move communications with them to your personal email, away from your work email. Why is that?
I don't recall that, but I don't know. It may have been that it would have been easier for me because oftentimes I carry my personal phone more often than I do my work phone. I happen to have both of them today, but it's just a matter of convenience. What I have learned from the very beginning is that any electronic device that I use, whether it's personal or work, is subject to open records. So there is no distinction. In fact, those emails or text messages that were the subject of some of the open records requests by your station came from my personal email. So it's just a matter of convenience.
Glad we're all on the same page about that, by the way.
Yeah, I want to ask you one question before we go to break, and we want to continue this conversation because I want to talk more about the DA's office. But with the Wren Collective, their website describes them as strategic advising for social change, bail reform, a lot of different things that they do. In the current climate that we're in, where you're being criticized by SAPOA and at one point the chief of police for low bails on some of these people that went out and then happened to get into a gunfight with the San Antonio police officers. Are you worried the message this sends, the relationship that your office has with a group like the Wren Collective?
I might be worried if she had anything to do with giving us advice on those issues. I don't recall ever reaching out to her and asking her what she thought would be the appropriate message with regard to bond, because it's a simple answer. We don't set bonds, we recommend bonds. So I don't know that I ever reached out to anybody, including my own local campaign manager, about that, because it's a pretty straightforward answer that I've been giving.
There is a safety plan that the county has enacted to try to make some of the changes to some of the issues that you have talked about here. We're going to talk about that on the other side of this break.
We're back here with Bexar County District Attorney Joe Gonzales talking about a number of different issues that his office has faced. And I'm glad that we were able to have this conversation, but I want to continue with what you think the biggest misconceptions about your office are right now.
Well, I think the biggest misconception has to do with me, people's perception. And I'll tell you, part of it has been the disinformation out in the community. It's been perpetuated by the Officers Association and by other members in the community that I'm soft on crime because I have brought criminal justice reform to Bexar County, which has always been about low-level nonviolent offenses. I will tell you that when it comes to violent crimes, I have been tough on crime. You know, we've had the highest murder conviction rate in Bexar County that we've had in 12 years. We have over 90% felony DWI convictions. Last year, we sent over 2,400 people to prison, 1,000 of those for violent offenses. So we are tough when we need to be tough. We've had several life sentences in our office, and that's the misconception is people think that I can't be tough when I need to be.
There is a public safety plan that has come out in the last couple of months as a result after that rising tension because of officers that were shot while pursuing suspects towards the end of last year. What are some changes your office has made, concrete changes that are making progress to try to deal with some of these underlying issues?
One of the biggest areas that we have determined need change is an improvement on our intake system in our office. We have a backlog of about 6,000 cases. That's pretty much the average backlog every month. We've already made some changes to tackle those cases. We have moved around some prosecutors that were traditionally trial court prosecutors to add to the intake division. We have reclassified their tasks so only the most senior prosecutors are handling the serious cases. The biggest benefit is the Commissioner's Court recently approved funding for us to move around some money so that we could develop a high-risk intake team. So those are prosecutors that are working evening hours on the weekend, tackling that backlog, and it's already made a huge impact. And soon I'm going to make a presentation to Commissioner's Court where I can reveal the numbers of cases that we have improved upon. In addition to that, one of the pluses is technology. We have gotten approval again from Commissioner's Court to negotiate a contract for the Axon product that is compatible with law enforcement, because, you know, we spend a lot of time trying to integrate or interface both systems. So that's been a huge a plus. So I look forward to implementing those and other programs that are part of the public safety plan.
How concerned are you with we talked about this a little bit during the break with the Wren Collective and the fact that they advocate lower bonds, they advocate changing the criminal justice system. How worried are you that there's at least going to be the perception out there that that's going to feed into the perception that you're easy on crime, that you're light on crime, that, you know, I think the SAPOA has called you "Let 'em go, Joe." I mean,
right.
how worried are you about that perception out there?
Well, let me just say this, because that is a narrative that they continue to use, but I think part of it, it's politics. They're playing politics because they want me out of the office, because they don't like having the Civil Rights Division. They don't like members of their departments to be held accountable, and we're going to continue to do that. I mean, that's the last thing he said when he was here last week. He says we can do things like there's a method in place to work with the governor's office on HB 17. So I think that's the motive to making those comments. It's all politics. With regard to having anybody engage in input on bonds. I haven't asked for anybody's advice on how to handle the bond situation, because it's pretty straightforward. We do not set bonds. We recommend bonds. And by the way, every year we recommend higher bonds than the previous year. On the average, we recommend between $100,000 and $150,000 for murder cases. We recommend $75,000 to $100,000 on aggravated robberies, on aggravated assaults with deadly weapons. So we're doing what we need to do to be recommending high bonds, and by and large, for the most part, magistrate judges are following those recommendations.
Bexar County DA Joe Gonzales, we appreciate you being here, appreciate the conversation.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Joe.